Brahmanda Purana, Part 4, Lalita Mahatmya, Chapter 29, Slaying of Bhandasura. Agastya said, O highly intelligent sage Hayagriva, the strength of Mantrini has been described. The slaying of Vishanga by Dandanatha in battle has been described. I wish to hear about the exploits of Sri Devi in the course of the battle. After seeing the mishap of his brother, what did Bhanda do due to the grief thereof? How far was he enthusiastic in fighting the battle? With whom did he fight after his brothers and sons were killed? Who were his allies and followers? Hayagriva said, Listen to this, O highly intelligent one. The narrative of Lalita is destructive of all sins. It is holy and it yields qualities, that is, siddhis like anima, minuteness, etc. During the equinoctial periods, as well as during the transits of the sun on holy occasions, and during the 5 Parvan days, it bestows siddhis and glory. It destroys all sins. The footnote says the 8th and 14th tithi per fortnight, the full moon and the new moon days, and the sun's passage from the Rashi, sign of zodiac, to another. On hearing that there in the battle his brothers had been killed, Bhanda was overwhelmed with great grief. He began to lament loudly. With his hairs dishevelled and scattered, he fell on the ground in a swoon. He did not get any consolation. He became emaciated due to the sorrow for his brother. Again and again he went on lamenting. On being pacified repeatedly by Kutilaksha, he got rid of his sorrow and became very furious. His forehead appeared ruthlessly dreadful because the brows were vibrating. His eyes became red like glowing coal. He sighed, he shied and breathed like a hissing black serpent. He began to hold his sword again and again in his hand and shook it threateningly. Suddenly he said to Kutilaksha, the chief of the entire army, out of anger, he began to produce humkara sound like the cloud at the time of dissolution. He began to roar. My brothers and sons were killed in battle by that and wicked woman with the help of Maya. I shall put out the great fire of sorrow for my brothers and sons with the liquid blood coming out of the throat of that wanton woman. Go, O Kutilaksha, get the army ready. After saying this, he wore on his chest a huge and thick coat of mail capable of withstanding the impact of Vajra. On his back he tied 2 quivers. He whirled the bow when the excessive twanging sound of the string was as hard as the deep breath. Furious like the fire at the destruction of the world, he rushed out of his city. There were altogether 40 excellent generals, including Talajanga and others posted at the eastern gate, who were 4 in number, who had held all kinds of weapons, who wore coats of mail, and who were haughty. The 35 generals included Kutilaksha, who was the lord of all armies and who was very furious, and lastly Bhanda himself. Their weapons flashed, Their hairs shone brightly. With brilliant coats of mail, they marched out. There were 2,000 Akshohinis, with 85 forming the latter half rear guard. This army followed Bhanda in order to suppress the enemy sportingly and collectively. When Bhandasura went out fully accompanied by his army, only women remained behind in the city of Shunyaka. The lord of Daityas, who was a great chariot fighter and hafty in war, mounted his excellent chariot called Abhila, to which 1,000 lions were yoked. He hastened with great lustre like the fire of world destruction whose flames blazed. The name of his sword was Ghataka. It had the same shape as the Chandrahasa sword. When the armies moved here and there, dust columns were raised. Being unable to bear their burden, it appeared as though the earth went to the heaven. Some of them who could not be contained on the earth moved ahead along the path of the sky. Some mighty warriors moved on riding on the shoulders of some. Neither in the cardinal points, nor on the sphere of the earth, nor in the sky could they be contained. They moved on with very great difficulty, as though they were addicted by the close contact of one another. Since the pressure was very great, many of the soldiers were crushed and ground into powder by the wheels of chariots. Some were trampled beneath the feet of elephants as they fell on the ground. A loud roar resembling the rumbling sound of the cloud was given out by him who was moving on along with all the soldiers. The universe became torn asunder by that excessively harsh leonine roar coming out of the mouth of Bhanda, the Daitya. The oceans became dried up, the moon and the sun fled, the stars fell down from the sky, the earth began to heave to and fro. The elephants of the cardinal points became frightened, the heaven dwellers swooned. The camp of the Shaktis became excited on account of a sudden and unexpected fear. In the middle of the battle, Shaktis held their vital breaths with very great difficulty. They took up once again their weapons that had been dropped down with fear before. The circular enclosure of fiery rampart that had been calmed down before rose up in flames once again. On account of the leonine roar of the leading Daitya, the twanging sounds of the bows of army generals, and the shrieks and sounds of warriors, universe became filled up with sound. Goddess Lalita decidedly inferred that the Daitya Bhanda had started out, and so she undertook to fight herself. Considering that the great fight with the Daitya Bhanda of vicious conduct was not possible for the other Shaktis, she herself took up the task. Her gloriously splendid great chariot, named Chakrarajaratha, moved ahead. The four Vedas were its four great wheels. The footnote says, as observed in note 1 on chapter 19, the chariot of Lalita symbolizes Vedic religion. The Vedas, Purusharthas, etc., are parts of her chariot. The four Purusharthas, the four aims in life, that is, Dharma, virtue, Artha, wealth, Kama, love, and Moksha, liberation from samsara, were its great horses. Bliss was the flag fitted to it. It had 9 steps. The deities stationed on the 9 steps kept their heavy bows ready drawn. They had more than a parardha, one followed by 17 zeros of attendants. The chariot was defended from all directions by these who were stationed on all steps. It was 10 yojanas in height, and the side of the base was 4 yojanas. Thus the leading chariot Chakraraja of the great queen shone remarkably as it moved on. When it Chakrarajaratha moved ahead, the other chariots with Shyama and Dandanatha also moved on. The chariot Geya Chakra went ahead and Kirichakra was in the rear. The vehicles of other Shaktis were Parardhas in number. They were men, lions, camels, donkeys, pythons, deer, birds, horses, elephants, bherundas, saravhas, tigers, vatamgra, vatam, vatamurgas, swift antelopes, etc. And other animals also became her vehicles. Shaktis who repeatedly endeavored to kill Bhanda and his Asura followers were of multiformed nature. Although the opening of the circular fiery rampart extended to a yojana in length, it was not sufficient for the outward march of the army. Desirous of an easy exit for all the armies, the Nitya deity named Jwala Malinika enlarged the opening further. Then the gloriously splendid mother of the worlds, the great queen of excessive valor and exploits, went out of the fiery city through the excellent opening. The divine Dundubhi's war drums sounded. Showers of flowers fell down. The great royal umbrella, set with pearls, was seen shining brilliantly in the firmament. Pleasingly clear omens indicating the glory of victory occurred in the army of Lalita. Portentous ill omens occurred in the army of enemies. Thereupon, the battle between the two armies started. As the volleys of arrows spread everywhere, a dense darkness settled above them. As herds of elephants were being killed, the drops of blood flowing from them carried away the severed heads by which the white umbrellas of the Daityas were concealed. Neither the quarters nor the sky, neither the mountains nor the earth, nothing was seen. Only the dust column was seen increasing in size. As the two armies fought with each, each other, a river of blood flowed. The footnote says it was a good picture of the battlefield occurring in details in the war parvans of the Mahabharata and repeated elsewhere in this text also. The dancing, headless bodies appeared like the plants and trees on the banks on either side. Thousands of tresses of the Daityas appeared like the tender shoots of Shaivala moss. The circular white umbrellas shone like the white lotuses. The series of feet of elephants cut by the wheels of chariots or by discuses of the heroes appeared like tortoises. The necks and cheeks of the great Daityas killed by Shaktis appeared like the rocky slabs. When the chauris fell down with their handles cut off, They appeared like the foam in that river of blood. Broken swords of keen edges appeared like the dense thickets of creepers on the banks. The river of blood appeared to be sparkling with pearl cascades on account of the series of eyes of the Daitya heroes. Hundreds of vehicles of Daityas appeared like hundreds of fishes and crocodiles. Thus, river of blood flowed. On the fourth day of the battle, beginning in the morning and extending to two praharas, 6 hours, the terrible battle between the two armies ensued, causing fear even to the god of death. Thereafter, a terrible battle ensued between Sri Lalita Devi and Bhanda. It caused a great deal of uproarious tumult in the different quarters due to the excitement of the discharge of missiles and counter missiles. It was extremely terrific on account of humkaras, hissing sounds of defiance of the soldiers, and the twanging sounds of bow strings, as well as due to dreadful arrows which were taken out from quivers discharged from excellent bows and which were capable of taking away lives. On account of her dexterity, the movements of her lotus like hands while discharging the arrows were not at all perceived in detail. Listen, O pot-born sage, listen. I shall describe everything that happened in the battle. When one arrow was fitted to the bow and discharged, it became 10 when leaving the bow, 100 while moving through space, 1,000 while falling amidst the army of Daityas, and then they came into contact with the bodies of Daityas. They developed into crores. By means of great arrows, the great queen caused very dense darkness, pierced heaven and earth, and pierced into the vital parts of the terrible Daityas. With his eyes turned red on account of anger, Danava Bhanda showered volleys of arrows on goddess Lalita. He discharged a great missile named Andhatamishraka, the great darkness. Maheshwari dispelled it by the arrow named Mahatarani, the great sun. The footnote says, as stated elsewhere, this battle symbolizes the struggle between good and evil forces. The missiles also signify evil forces used by Bhanda and good forces countered by Lalita. I give below the list of so-called astras discharged by Bhanda and destroyed by Lalita with a counter or good force. Astras used by Bhanda and Lalita, verse number 62 to 138. Bhanda, Lalita. Andhata great darkness. uh, Mahatarani, the great sun. Lalita. Bhanda, Pakhanda, heresy. Gayatri, Lalita, Gayatri. Andhastra, blindness. The counter was Chakshushmatta, possession of eyesight. Shakti Nasha, destruction of Shaktis. The counter was Vishwavasu. Antaka, god of death. The counter was Mahamrityunjaya, Lord Shiva, conqueror of death. Sarvastra Smritinasa, destruction of memory of astras. The counter was dharana, retention of memory. Bhaya, fear. The counter was indrastra. Maharogas, great diseases. The counter was Vaishnava, created Achyuta, Ananta, and Govinda, burnt disease by Humkara. Ayurnashana, destructive of longevity. The counter was Kala Samkarshin, death controller. Mahasurastra, creating great asuras like Madhu, Kaitava, etc. The counter was Durga, demon killing goddess, with her original weapons. Mukastra, causing dumbness. The counter was Mahavagvadini, the highly eloquent one. Bhanda, the great hero, discharged the missile Pakhandastra, heresy, in the course of battle. For dispelling it, the mother of the universe discharged the missile of Gayatri. Bhanda discharged the missile Andhastra, blindness, that was destructive of the vision of Shaktis. The mother subdued it by means of the great missile Chakshushmatta, endowment with eyes. In the course of great battle, Bhanda discharged the missile named Shaktinasha, destruction of Shaktis. Good, the goddess dispelled its pride by the missile of Vishwavasu. Bhanda, the extremely infuriated Danava, discharged the missile Antakastra, with Antaka, the god of death, as the presiding deity. The goddess destroyed its power by the missile of Mahamrityunjaya, with Lord Shiva, the conqueror of the god of death, as the presiding lord. Bhanda discharged the missile named Sarvastra Smriti Nasa, destruction of the memory of all missiles. Chakreshi destroyed its power by means of the missile Dharana, retention in memory. Bhanda discharged the missile of Bhaya, fear, that made all Shaktis afraid. Jagadambika, the mother of the worlds, discharged the missile of Indra that bestowed freedom from fear. The Danava discharged the missile of Maharogas, great diseases, among the armies of Shaktis. Thereupon, pulmonary consumption and thousands of other diseases began to ravage. In order to achieve their eradication and prevention, Lalita, the great goddess, discharged the great missile of the great mantra of the three names of Lord Vishnu. Achyuta, Ananta, and Govinda rose up from the missile. By their humkara alone, they burned those diseases and gave relief and delight to the Shaktis. They bowed down to Maheshani. They were employed by her to suppress sickness of her devotees in all the three worlds. They went to their own region. Bhanda, the Danava, discharged the missile Ayurnashana, destructive of longevity. The queen discharged the missile in the form of Kala Sankarshani, death controlling. Bhanda, the Danava, discharged the dreadfully powerful missile of Mahasurastra. Thereupon, thousands of asuras, very powerful with huge bodies, rose up from the missile, such as Madhu, Kaitava, Mahisha, Dhumralochana, the asuras beginning with Chanda, Munda, Chikshura, Chamara, Raktavija, Shumbha, Nishumbha, the Kalakeyas of great strength. Others too, such asuras named Dhumra, etc., rose from the missile with their hard and powerful weapons. All those excellent Danavas smashed and crushed the army of Shaktis. They shrieked and howled dreadfully. Shaktis, crushed and crumbled by the Daityas, cried aloud, Ha ha, alas, and sought refuge in Lalita immediately, saying, Protect us. Thereupon Devi became furious. In her fury, she burst into a boisterous laughter of challenge. Thereupon arose a glorious deity named Durga. She had a cosmic form evolved by the refulgence of all devas. She wielded and wore the following weapons and ornaments, viz., the trident given by Shulin, Lord Shiva, the discus given by Chakrin, Lord Vishnu, the conch given by Varuna, Shakti, javelin given by the fire god, the bow and the pair of inexhaustible quivers given by Maruts in the course of the great war, the thunderbolt given by Indra, a goblet given by Dhanada Kubera, the great staff Kaladanda, the noose given by Pashadhara Varuna, a water pot given by Brahma, a bale given by Airavata, the sword and the shield given by Mrityu, the necklace given by the ocean, and the ornaments given by Vishwakarman. With her gloriously splendid limbs having ray as brilliant and sparkling as a row of thousand rayed suns, she made all weapons gleam and glitter. She appeared splendid with other equipments and accoutrements given by others, thus riding on her vehicle lion Narayani, goddess Durga, carried on war. Danavas such as Mahisha and others were struck down by her. She carried on war in the same way as formerly, as explained in Chandika Saptashati, dispelling the haughtiness of Mahisha and others. After completing that difficult task, she bowed down before Lalita. The footnote says the work is popularly known as Saptashati. It is, however, not mentioned before in this Purana, though the author states as formerly explained. The wicked Danava discharged the missile Mukastra, that of dumbness, among the armies of Shaktis. The mother of the universe discharged the missile named Mahavagavadini, the great and eloquent one. The footnote says from verse 90 onwards, Bhanda used an astra for counteracting which god Vishnu had to incarnate. Here, the 9 avatars of Vishnu, as we know them today, are given and not the ones in the body of the Bhagavad Purana, such as Dattatreya, etc. In the course of battle, the haughty and ferocious Danava Bhanda discharged missiles and created base asuras who stole away the Vedas and fund of lords. Those asuras were turned away by the great queen by the nail of thumb of her right hand. Bhanda, the extremely heroic Daitya, discharged Arnavastra, missile of ocean, in the course of the battle. Thereat the army of Shakti sank down in a flood of uncontrollable waters. Then the primordial tortoise, extending to a yojana in length, was born from the nail of the index finger of the right hand of Sri Lalita Devi. The Shaktis, who were supported by him by means of that huge skull-like shell of large area, became delighted. They discarded their fear of the Sagara sea missile. Continuation from the previous page. From verse 19 onwards, Bhanda used the astra for counteracting with God, which God Vishnu had to incarnate. Here, the 9 avatars of Vishnu, as we know them today, are given and not the ones in the body of the Bhagavad Purana, such as the Tatra, etc. One more point about avatars of Vishnu is that they arise from the nails of the fingers of Lalita, indicating the greatness of Lalita as compared with Vishnu, Bhanda, and Lalita. Use the opponent for whom Vishnu incarnated, incarnation of Vishnu. 1. Veda stealing demon. Uh, Lalita, the fish incarnation, is implied out of the nail of right hand thumb. Bhanda. Number 2. Aranavastra. Lalita, tortoise incarnation, supported Shaktis on its back. Bhanda. Hiranyaksha. Lalita, divine boar, Varaha. He killed Hiranyaksha. Bhanda. Hiranyakashipu. Lalita, man lion, tore to pieces Hiranyakashipu. Bhanda. Balindra or Bali. Lalita, Vamana. Bhanda. Sahasrarjuna. Lalita, Parashurama. Bhanda. Paulastya, Ravana. Lalita, Kodandarama, son of Dasharatha. Rajasura, a great number of demons were born as kings. Lalita, Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Kali, missile. Buddha is not mentioned here. Lalita, Kalki. Bhanda, Mahamoha, great delusion. Lalita, Sambhava. Then, by discharging the Narayana, Pashupata, and Mahakameshwara missile, the great goddess killed all the soldiers of Bhanda, his 40 generals, and finally the Asura Bhanda himself. The Lord then quaffed the entire quantity of water in the ocean. Then the wicked Danava discharged the great missile of Hiranyaksha. From it, thousands of Hiranyakshas were born with clubs as their weapons. On being hurt and killed by them, the armies of Shaktis became agitated due to great fright in the course of war. They became scattered here and there. Thereupon a huge white boar rose up from the nail of the middle finger of the right hand of Sri Lalita. It was like the Kailasha mountain. Crores and crores of those Hiranyakshas were utterly annihilated when they were smashed and crushed, as well as torn asunder by that snorted boar as hard as adamant. Thereupon Bhanda knitted his eyebrows due to great anger. Hiranyakashipu's crores in number were born from his eyebrows. They were as brilliant as the blazing sun. Their weapons too were refulgent and brilliant. They smashed and crushed the army of Shaktis as well as Prahlada, who was as it were the greatest bliss of the Shaktis. It was he who became a boy, who he was afflicted by Hiranya, and so sought refuge in Lalita. The queen became merciful towards him. Then, in order to protect Prahlada, who was in the form of bliss of Shaktis, the great goddess shook the tip of the ring finger of her right hand. From it arose Janardana with the face of a lion and the body of a man beneath the neck. He shook the thick cluster of mens. His three eyes shone. Claws were his weapons. He had the forms of Kala and Rudra. He made shouts of dreadful, boisterous laughs. He had 1,000 stuffed like hands. He was ready to obey the commands of Lalita. Within a moment, by means of his claws as hard as thunderbolt, he tore up all the Hiranyakashipus who originated from the eyebrows of Bhanda. Bhanda, the great Asura, then discharged against the goddess Lalita the extremely dreadful missile Balindra that was destructive of all deities. For destroying the pride of that missile, hundreds of Vamanas came out from the highly powerful tip of the small finger of the right hand of the great queen. They increased in size every moment. They were very mighty, with nooses in their hands. They were born of the tip of small finger of the right hand of the wife of Kamesha, that is Lalita. They were highly enthusiastic and they had huge bodies. They tied with nooses all the Balindras born of that missile. Thus they destroyed that missile too. In the course of battle, Bhanda, the Daitya, discharged Haihaya missile. From that were born thousands and crores of Arjunas with 1,000 hands. Arising from the nail of the thumb of the left hand of Sri Lalita and blazing with anger, Rama of Bhrigu family made the roaring sound of a lion. He tore up these fellows by the sharp edge of his axe. Within a moment he destroyed these Arjunas numbering thousands. Thereupon the infuriated Daitya Bhanda made a hissing humkara sound out of anger. From that humkara rose Ravana with his sword Chandrahasa. He was surrounded by Rakshasa armies numbering 1,000 Akshohinis. Taking his younger brother Kumbhakarna and his son Meghanada with him, he smashed the army of Shaktis to a large extent. Thereupon, from the nail of the index finger of the left hand of Sri Lalita was born Kodandarama, accompanied by Lakshmana. Matted hair constituted his crown. On his back he had tied up his quiver by means of creepers. He was dark in complexion like the blue lotus. He repeatedly made the twanging sound from his bow. By means of divine missiles he destroyed the Rakshasa army in a moment. He crushed Paulastya, that is Ravana, and his brother Kumbhakarna. Lakshmana killed Meghnada, the great hero. Danava Bhanda then discharged the extremely terrible missile of Dvivida. From it were born many monkeys with reddish brown eyes. On account of anger, their faces became extremely copper colored. Every one of them was on a par with Hanuman. They destroyed the army of Shaktis. They produced harsh and cruel kremkaras, shrill sounds. Then, from the nail of the middle finger of the left hand of Sri Lalita issued forth Talanka with eyes red like midday, his middle eye red due to anger. He had tied a blue garment on his body. He was as pure as the Kailasa mountain. He destroyed all those monkeys born of Dvivida missile. The mighty demon discharged the great missile named Rajasura. From that missile, many demoniac kings came out, such as Shishupala, Dantavaktra, Salva, Shalva, the king of Kashi, Poundraka Vasudeva, Rukmi, Dimbaka, Hamsaka, Sambara, Pralamba, Asura, Vanakamsa, the wrestler Chanura, Mushtika, Utpalashekara, Arishta, Dhenuka, Keshi, Kalia, the twin Arjunas, Terminalia Arjuna, Putana, Shakata, Kart, Trinavarta, and other asuras. The great hero named Naraka, the asura Mura, who had the form of Vishnu, etc. Many of them rose up along with these armies with weapons in their arms. In order to destroy all of them, the eternal Lord Vishnu originated from the ring finger of the lotus like left hand of Sri Devi. He made a Chaturvyuha, a group of four deities. They became four distinct beings, viz. Vasudeva, Samkarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. All of them had weapons lifted up. They destroyed all those great asuras who were in the guise of kings of evil conduct. They had been functioning like a burden on the earth. When they were destroyed, Asura Bhanda became highly furious. He discharged the dreadful Kali missile that caused violation and transgression of virtue. Thereupon, from the Kali missile were born kings Andhras and Pundras, Kiratas, Savaras, Hunas, and Yavanas who had sinful activities. They were the transgressors of Vedic injunctions. They were inimical to virtuous activities. They killed living beings. They upset the disciplines of four castes and stages of life and brought about mixture of castes. They had dirty limbs. They smashed and tortured the armies of Lalita and Shaktis again and again. Thereupon, Janardana, named Kalki, was born of the nail of small finger of sparkling lotus like left hand of Sri Lalita. He was riding on a horse. His glory was bright and brilliant. He made an attahasa, boisterous laugh of challenging by his sound resembling the blow of thunderbolt. The Kiratas swooned and died. Shaktis were delighted. The leaders of 10 Avataras incarnations completed this difficult task, bowed down to Lalita, and stood by with palms joined in reverence. They had been engaged by Mother Lalita to defend virtue and piety in every kalpa through the births of fish, etc. They then started for Vaikuntha. When all the miraculous missiles were thus destroyed, the evil minded asuras discharged the missile of Mahamoha, great delusion and fainting. The Shaktis swooned on account of that. By discharging the Sambhava by discharging the Shambhava missile, that of Lord Shiva. The mother split up the Mahamoha missile. As the great battle took place thus, with the continuous flow of missiles and counter missiles, the sun, the Lord of Rays, was about to reach the western mountain, the mountain of setting. Then, by means of Narayana missile, the goddess Lalitambika reduced all Akshohinis to ashes in the course of the battle. Then, by the Pashupata missile, which had the luster of the enkindled fire of destruction of the world, the great queen smashed and crushed 40 generals. The only one left out was the great Asura Bhanda. All the kinsmen of the wicked fellow had already been killed. He blazed with fury. He was a great demon of much inherent strength and fierce valor. He had caused a great havoc in the entire universe. The mother Lalita, the great goddess, killed him by means of Mahakameshwara missile that had the splendor of 1,000 suns. His city Shunyaka was overrun by the flames of that missile. Suddenly it was completely burned down, along with women and children, cowpens, riches, and granaries. Only the bare ground remained. Due to destruction of Bhanda, the three worlds danced with delight. After carrying out this task of the Devas, Kameshwari, whose conduct was never blameworthy, who was the ornamental glory of the chariot Sri Chakrarajaratha, who was the mother of the three worlds, who was equipped with all shining assets, and who was endowed with the glory of victory, shone brilliantly. All her soldiers had been subjected to fatigue on account of their work in the battlefield, viz., fighting. They had been burned by the fire of powerful arrows of Bhanda, the Asura. When the sun set, Sri Devata, whose prowess was well renowned, brought them to her camp. O leading ascetic, if anyone reads even once the narrative of the slaying of Bhanda, the Danava, carried out thus by Lalitamba, all his sorrows will be destroyed. He will be master of all 8 siddhis. Both worldly enjoyment and salvation are within his reach. Those men who read this narrative on holy days will attain flourishing, excellent fortune. This narrative of Lalita's valor is destructive of all sins. It is sacred and conducive to the attainment of all siddhis.